I did not like the Clone Wars. Now I know it's a pretty bold move to start off a video talking about the Clone Wars sequel series with a bombshell so severe, but that's how we tend to do things here. Regardless of whether or not you ask for my opinion on the Clone Wars, I think it's important that I give it, because it establishes why I never gave its sequel show a chance when it first released. Maybe it's the lack of real nostalgia I have for this animation style, or maybe it's just, I don't know, the Hat Man. One thing I know for a fact is that when The Bad Batch was first released, I didn't care in the slightest. When the first episode premiered in 2021, I gave up almost 30 minutes in, because at that moment I just wasn't into Star Wars anymore. So, what changed? Being truthful, I'm not entirely sure, however I suspect it's got something to do with that little convention I went to in April of this year, which is something I am still never going to financially recover from. Around a week before that thing, I decided I wanted to do it. If I was paying upwards of £800 before I even stepped into London, I was going to make sure I'd seen all of the Star Wars content that was considered canon at the time. So over the course of about 50-ish hours, I binged it. I binged The Bad Batch, a show created by Dave Filoni, which is a man I have many thoughts on, but will refrain from talking about for the sake of keeping the retention intact. Now we get to the reason why I started off this video with such a controversial statement, because I think it acts as a nice contrast to how I'm going to conclude this opening. I liked The Bad Batch. So before I get into things here, I want to quickly ask that if you're enjoying the content I make and want to see more of it, that you consider subscribing to help the channel grow. That, as well as leaving a like and sharing the video if you enjoy it, can really go a long way in helping me in the long term. I want to start out by saying that this doesn't redeem Dave Filoni in my eyes, because not only does he not actually play an immense part in the show's overall creation past, creating it, he's still also a nostalgia merchant who would tape order 66 over his own wedding video if it meant seeing it again. But I do have to give him credit for coming up with an idea that I don't entirely hate. The Bad Batch from its conception was something I wasn't initially keen on, but it started to grow on me, and by the end of it all, I kinda wanted a little more. It's not a perfect show, this is not some redemption arc I'm about to go on where I start defending every part of it, because it has flaws. And trust me, I will talk about them here. But as is customary with a Media 13 video, I'd like to start off with what I liked about it, because to be honest, that's what I enjoy talking about here. So, let's start off with our core cast of characters. Hunter, Wrecker, Echo, Tech, and Crosshair. These guys right here are the titular Bad Batch. However, this one, not so much, because he's a good soldier and spends the series being an antagonistic presence on the side of the Empire. We do still have a group of 5 though, because in steps Omega. She's a bright, happy little girl on Kamino who's actually revealed to be a clone. The characters are a major positive in this show, because as far as our Bad Batch goes, Crosshair excluding because I do have thoughts, I actually ended up caring a lot about them. If I have to give an out and out favourite, it would be a struggle between 2 in particular, but Omega would likely be the choice, with Hunter coming in second. I am definitely not biased, because I spent half of Star Wars Celebration running around shouting names of the Bad Batch in the Omega accent, I swear. They feel like a genuinely well-written duo. The feeling I get from seeing the dynamic between them honestly is what I think The Mandalorian is desperately trying to rekindle between Din and Grogu in that found father/child relationship. Where the latter faded considerably going into season 2, the relationship between Hunter and Omega is one that only continues to grow as things develop through the episodes. What makes that even better is that this doesn't really hamper Omega's relationship with the others in the group either. The show is able to build up each of the individual relationships Omega has, while building on the pre-existing camaraderie that the Batch have with each other. There are solid episodes of development where she gets the chance to grow with Hunter, Tech, and even Echo too, the latter of those probably being the one member of the Bad Batch I really have no feelings towards. Being the legacy carryover from the Clone Wars, Echo just doesn't really do much for me in this show. He feels more like an inclusion as opposed to a character at times. With characters that I don't really care for, there's probably an equal amount. I don't really have much to say on Crosshair at all. I feel like there's a lot that they could do with him in season 3, and I reckon it'll be good, but for now, I really don't care either way. The side characters don't really excite me. They range from fine in terms of development like Fee to why when thinking about someone like Sid. None of them stand out at all, but when you have pretty much all of your focal points on the level they need to be, the side characters are allowed to dip a little in my eyes. The cameos are an interesting topic in themselves, because I am someone that doesn't normally like them, I'm someone that's very against them. However, there's not a single one here that I feel is that egregious. I do think there's some that just it didn't have to happen, but for the most part, to the credit of the writing team, they're able to make the cameos make enough sense that I'm not overly against them. Don't get it twisted though, I still don't like the cameo fest stuff that this franchise has been doing lately. I still don't like how this show starts to delve into just cameo of the week for a while. Just because they're able to make these cameos make sense doesn't mean the show avoids becoming stale in the moments where it feels like cameo of the week. We have people like Kanan, Rex, Saw Gerrera, Fennec Shand, Harrison Dula, and yeah, they're all fine. I don't really think there's a single cameo that doesn't belong. I just think the quality of cameos at times drags and takes away from what the show is trying to do or the story it's trying to tell, because to a degree, that becomes my first relatively big issue with the show. The Bad Batch for me comes with one major flaw, and that is how the story is structured. In my honest view, this show struggles with deciding whether it wants to be adventure of the week or if it wants to tell a bigger story. It almost does work in areas with the smaller scale stuff leading into the more important narrative arcs, but there are a lot of areas where it does delve into just a little too much filler. I'm not against the occasional episode, but you do have to question the show's overall worth if the story feels mudded by so many meaningless threads. I think the weirdest part for me, and yes, I will explain this, is that while the show does feel aimless at times, from a metaphorical standpoint, that works in its favour. I mean, let's look at it for a second and just understand that the focal point of this show is clones, and the story being told here, the era that it's showcasing, is that phase in time where clones were slowly becoming decommissioned. This means that clones are being left without a purpose and as such are aimless, much like this show at times. Is what I'm saying here a cope? Most likely. I don't think there's any sort of nuanced idea that the show is trying to present here. I do just think this genuinely struggles with its story structure at times, and again, that's fine, because at worst the filler is just tedious. It never veers anywhere below average, and I really do hope that for the final season of the show, it's able to avoid that filler and just go full effort on the story. Because otherwise, I don't think this show can fulfill the potential that I now see it has. The Bad Batch is a show I really didn't expect to care for, and I do think I owe the show and its fans some sort of an apology because I was really narrow-minded and, to be completely honest, wrong. I was wrong about The Bad Batch. There's so many little things here and there that I do genuinely enjoy about this show, not even with its characters like I've discussed. I think a lot of the score is actually really strong, and I particularly like the theme too. And while I have my reservations about Clone Wars, the music in that show has always been one of the stronger aspects in my eyes, and it's nice to see that it continues along that path with its sequel. The animation is solid, there's literally no flaws whatsoever with it in design, but I'm still not sure this is some godsend. I do think the style is cool, but nostalgia aside, I'm really not sure if there's anything else about it that sticks out from that. It's clearly the same style as Clone Wars being the sequel series, and again, I do think that's fine, but I really do think this is the last time I want to see this style used. In my opinion, it almost feels patented by this era, and when an era ends, I think it's time to say goodbye, rather than trying to prolong it. One last thing before we move on, because it wouldn't be a Media 13 video if I didn't bring this up somehow, but I love how this show continues to sow the seeds for what is going to eventually become the sequel trilogy. It really brings me a lot of happiness to see that the trilogy just isn't being ignored and they're actively fleshing it out even when not particularly doing anything within that era yet. We've now seen that we are getting future content with the return of Daisy Ridley as Rey, but for the meantime, I do like that this is how we're being reminded of this trilogy. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I can say on this show. To summarise it one last time, I will say that yes, I liked The Bad Batch. I am now actively looking forward to whatever they decide to do in Season 3, and I'm almost sad that I've got into it at the point that I have. In all honesty, I'm just glad that there's now yet another corner of this galaxy that I take some sort of enjoyment in, and at the end of the day, I think that's probably the most important thing. But those have been my thoughts on The Bad Batch, a show that I'll now admit I was wrong about. If you want to let me know your thoughts either on this video or the show itself, you can do so in the comments. I'd love to read through them. One more time, if you do enjoy the content I'm putting out and you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing, and I promise I'll do my best to make sure you don't regret it. Also, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Any help in getting the channel out there is noticed, and I appreciate every single person that does it. But with all of that said, I'll see you in a couple of weeks when we look across to the live action side of Star Wars with The Mandalorian Season 3.